Emily sat quietly on the edge of her armchair, staring out the rain-streaked window. The gray sky mirrored the heaviness in her chest, and the rhythmic tapping of raindrops against the glass seemed to echo the quiet loneliness that had settled over her life. The house, usually warm and lively, felt unusually empty tonight. Daniel had left earlier that week for a business trip, and the silence of the house seemed louder than ever in his absence. She held a warm cup of tea in her hands, feeling the heat seep into her fingers, but it did little to ease the chill she felt inside. The aroma of chamomile was comforting, yes, but it was a fragile comfort, like a thin blanket over a vast emptiness. Emily had always loved quiet nights at home. She often found herself lost in her own thoughts, her imagination filling the spaces left by the world outside. Yet tonight, the silence was different. Tonight it felt heavy, as if it were pressing against her chest, reminding her of all the moments she longed to share but couldn't. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, tugging at the branches and rattling the windows. A flash of lightning briefly illuminated the room, casting fleeting shadows on the walls. Emily shivered not from the cold, but from a strange mix of anticipation and unease. Something about this stormy night made her heart feel alive in a way that the ordinary calm never did. She sighed and turned her gaze back to the room. Every corner held a memory. The worn sofa where she and Daniel had shared quiet Sunday mornings. The bookshelves lined with stories they had loved. The small photograph on the mantel of their first trip together. Memories were comforting, yes, but tonight they reminded her of absence. She missed the sound of Daniel's laughter bouncing off the walls, the warmth of his presence in the otherwise silent house. Emily's mind wandered to the future. More accurately, the lack of one for tonight. She imagined Daniel returning, smiling as he walked through the door, and her heart ached with longing. But that was hours away, and until then, she was alone with the storm and her thoughts as she sat there. A sudden flash of lightning illuminated the garden, revealing droplets glistening like tiny diamonds on every leaf. Emily's breath caught in her throat. There was a strange beauty in the chaos outside, a kind of wild freedom she often envied but rarely experienced. She wondered if life could ever surprise her the way the storm had surprised the garden. Could an unexpected moment, a small twist of fate, bring warmth back into her quiet evenings? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft creak from the hallway. Emily froze, listening intently. The house had always had its small, ordinary noises, but tonight each sound felt amplified. A floorboard shifted, the wind rattled the window panes, and even the ticking of the old clock on the wall seemed louder than usual. She tilted her head, straining to hear more. But there was nothing, only the steady rhythm of rain outside. Shaking her head with a small, rueful smile, Emily returned to her tea. She realized she had been holding her breath. The storm outside was not threatening, but it stirred something inside her, a quiet anticipation. Like the night was holding a secret she hadn't yet discovered. She set the cup down and walked over to the window, brushing her fingers against the cool glass. The garden was blurred under the heavy rain, but the movement of the leaves and branches gave it life. Emily pressed her forehead lightly against the glass, imagining the wind as a messenger of change, carrying with it something she could not yet name. Her heart felt a strange tug, a whisper that tonight would be different. Something was about to happen, she just didn't know what. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself a small spark of hope. Life had been predictable and quiet for far too long. She had followed the routines, smiled when necessary, and kept her heart tucked safely away. But storms, she realized, had a way of stirring things that had been buried beneath the surface. Perhaps, just perhaps, the storm outside was a reflection of what was about to stir within her own life. Emily let out a slow, contemplative breath. She wasn't afraid, not really. She was curious. There was something in her chest that had been sleeping quietly for a long time, and she could feel it beginning to wake. The wind howled once more, the thunder rolled, and she smiled faintly to herself. Tonight, she would not simply wait for life to return to its ordinary rhythm. Tonight, she would be ready for the unexpected. And then, just as she turned to sit back down, she heard it a soft, Deliberate knock at the door. Emily's heart skipped a beat. He knocked at the door, lingered in Emily's mind, echoing against the quiet walls of the house. She hesitated for a moment, her hand hovering near the doorknob, and then slowly, with a careful breath, she opened it. Standing there, soaked from the rain, was a figure she hadn't expected to see, not in this lifetime, not on this stormy night. It was Nathan, to her childhood friend. Time seemed to fold in on itself. She blinked, unsure if the memory of his familiar smile had blurred with years of imagination. Nathan looked older, just a little taller. A little more confident, but his eyes were the same. Warm, honest, and full of unspoken understanding. "Emily," he said softly, almost a whisper, as if saying her name out loud might break the fragile spell that hung in the air. She felt a rush of emotions: surprise, joy, and a faint ache of nostalgia. Memories tumbled forward, vivid and immediate. She remembered the summers they had spent running through the neighborhood parks, the laughter that had filled the air, the shared secrets whispered under the shade of old oak trees. Nathan had always been there, the kind of friend who knew her without needing explanations. He had known her joy and her fears, her dreams, and the small doubts she often kept tucked away. "Nathan," she said, finally finding her voice. I didn't expect to see you here." "I know," he replied, stepping inside carefully, shaking water from his coat. "The storm. It took me by surprise. I thought I knew the way, but I got turned around somewhere near the river. I hope I'm not intruding." Emily shook her head. "Of course not. Come in. You're drenched." They moved to the living room, where the candlelight flickered softly against the walls. As Nathan took off his wet coat and hung it to dry, Emily's mind wandered back to the last time they had seen each other. It had been years ago, just after high school. Life had pulled them in different directions, as Emily had moved to the city for college. Daniel had entered her life soon after, and Nathan had gone on his own journey. They had stayed in touch sporadically through the occasional letter or message. But the closeness they had once shared had been interrupted by distance, circumstance, and unspoken hesitation. She remembered one afternoon vividly, a memory that had stayed with her through all the years. She and Nathan had been sitting by the old riverbank, the sun sparkling on the water surface, and they had talked about their dreams. Nathan had told her he wanted to see the world, to experience life in all its forms, while Emily had admitted her quiet wish for a simple, steady life, filled with love and comfort. "Do you ever wonder what might have been?" Nathan had asked then, his eyes searching hers. Emily had smiled softly, hiding the small pang in her chest. "Sometimes," she had admitted. "But I think some things are meant to be memories, not realities." That had been the moment she realized the depth of their connection, a bond built on trust, shared dreams, and the kind of understanding that didn't need words. But something had always kept them apart: timing, choices, and the gentle awareness that their paths, however intertwined in spirit, had diverged in life. Now, standing in her living room, drenched and quiet, Nathan looked at her with that same steady gaze. It was as if the years had melted away, leaving only the essence of the friendship they had once shared. Emily felt a rush of warmth in her chest, a mixture of comfort and longing that made her heart ache in the best possible way. They sat together, the storm outside casting shadows across their faces. Nathan spoke of his travels, the places he had seen, and the people he had met. Emily shared her own stories, the little victories, the quiet challenges, the joys and sorrows of a life she had been building while he was gone. Through it all, there was a rhythm to their conversation, a natural ebb and flow that felt familiar, like the gentle turning of a well-loved book. They laughed softly at old jokes, nodded knowingly at memories only they could understand, and in the pauses, there was a quiet acknowledgement of what had been left unsaid between them. Emily realized, with a mix of surprise and clarity, how much she had missed this connection. The bond they shared was not built on romance alone, was deeper, sturdier, and more intimate than she had remembered. It was built on years of shared experience, empathy, and a profound understanding of each other's hearts. The storm raged on outside, but inside, the room seemed warmer, safer. filled with the comfort of familiarity. Emily glanced at Nathan, feeling a gentle tug in her chest, a quiet longing she had not fully acknowledged until now. They had been kept apart by life, by choices, and by timing, but in this moment, none of that seemed to matter. For the first time in years, Emily allowed herself to hope not for a grand romantic future, not for a life rewritten, but for this one perfect night, for the chance to reconnect, to speak, to laugh, and to remember what had once been, for the possibility that sometimes the past had a way of returning to guide the present. And as Nathan smiled at her, brushing a stray droplet of rain from his hair, Emily felt the storm outside had intensified, and Emily could feel the house vibrating with the wind. Rain streaked the windows in relentless sheets, and the occasional clap of thunder made the walls shiver. Inside, the air was warm and still, filled only with the soft crackle of a candle and the quiet presence of Nathan, who had moved closer to the fireplace. Emily watched him as he gently dried his coat. There was something familiar in his movements, a comfort she hadn't realized she had missed. It wasn't just the nostalgia. It was the way their lives seemed to collide again in this moment, perfectly timed despite the years that had separated them. She felt a strange flutter in her chest, not fear, not excitement, but something in between. A recognition of the bond they had once shared. Nathan noticed her gaze and offered a small, hesitant smile. "You haven't changed much," he said softly. "Still the same thoughtful, careful Emily I remember from back then." Emily smiled, but there was a tinge of sadness behind it. "And you're still the same, Nathan," she replied. "A little older, a little wiser, maybe, but the same." Their words hung in the air, simple yet loaded with meaning. It was strange how life could pull people apart only to bring them back together through coincidence or perhaps fate. Emily couldn't help but wonder how it had happened that Nathan appeared at her door on this very stormy night. After all these years, as they settled in the living room, Nathan gestured toward a small box he had carried with him. "I didn't mean to intrude," he said, his voice careful, "but I thought you might like this." Emily took the box, curiosity mixing with a sudden warmth in her chest. Inside were photo snapshots of their past, captured moments she had almost forgotten. A picture of them laughing on the swings at the park, another of them walking along the riverbank, soaked in sunlight, their hands accidentally brushing. Each photo was a memory frozen in time, a reminder of a bond that had survived distance and years. She looked up at Nathan, her eyes glistening slightly. I can't believe you've kept these. They reminded me," he said simply, "of us, of what we had. And I couldn't help but wonder, maybe it wasn't really gone. Maybe it was waiting for the right moment to come back." Emily's heart beat a little faster. She had felt the absence of their connection, the void left by years of silence. But she had never imagined that it could return so suddenly, so fully. The room seemed smaller now, more intimate, the storm outside fading into the background as their shared past and present collided for a while. They just sat there, flipping through the photographs, laughing at old memories and softly teasing each other about the small things they had done as teenagers. The sound of their laughter was almost magical in its simplicity, a balm for the years of distance and separation. Every glance, every smile, carried a weight of unspoken emotion, recognition that what had existed between them had never truly disappeared. Then, as Nathan handed Emily a photo of them standing side by side at the riverbank, a sudden crack of thunder shook the house. Emily jumped slightly, and Nathan instinctively reached to steady her hand. Their fingers touched briefly, a fleeting connection that sent a quiet shiver through both of them. It was a small, ordinary gesture, but in that moment it felt monumental. The storm outside, the flickering candlelight, the memories, and the years of absence all converged into a single, intense awareness. They still mattered to each other. Emily pulled her hand back slightly, embarrassed by the intensity of her own reaction. She looked down at the photo and whispered, "It feels like no time has passed at all." Nathan nodded, his eyes reflecting the soft light of the candle. "Some things don't fade, Emily. Some bonds are too strong, too important to be lost to time or distance." The words lingered in the room, resonating in a way that neither of them could ignore. Emily felt a quiet hope blooming inside her. Hope that perhaps this night, with its storm and its surprises, had given them a chance to reconnect in a way they never had before. And then, almost as if the universe had been waiting for them to realize it, a sudden gust of wind blew open the window slightly, letting in a soft spray of rain. Nathan instinctively moved to close it, but Emily stopped him, laughing softly. "It's fine," she said. "The storm. It feels right, like it's part of tonight." Nathan smiled, his eyes warm and understanding. "Maybe it is," he said. "Maybe the storm brought us back together." Emily's gaze met his, and for a moment, words were unnecessary. The years, the distance, the quiet longing, they all converged in that look. Something had shifted tonight, something neither of them could ignore. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside, the room was calm. Their connection, once paused by circumstance, was now alive, again renewed, real, and impossibly present. And Emily realized that while they could not change the past, the present had given them something extraordinary. It's a second chance at a bond that had always mattered. The stormy night had done more than just bring rain and thunder. It had brought them back to each other. The storm had softened now, leaving behind a steady drizzle that pattered gently against the roof. Inside, the warm glow of candlelight filled the room, casting soft shadows across the walls. Emily and Nathan sat near the fireplace, their eyes occasionally meeting, but neither speaking the words that weighed heavily in the air. It was strange how silence could carry so much meaning. Every glance, every half-smile seemed to whisper what they couldn't say aloud. Emily's heart felt full and heavy all at once, a quiet ache she had long buried beneath the routines of life. She realized she had spent years suppressing feelings she barely allowed herself to name feelings for Nathan, for the bond they had shared, and for the unspoken possibilities that had always lingered in the background of her heart. Nathan seemed equally conflicted. He traced the edge of the wooden mantel absent-mindedly, as if avoiding her gaze, yet every so often his eyes flicked toward her, warm and searching. There was a tenderness there, a recognition of everything that had been left unsaid between them. And Emily felt a tug at her chest in ways both familiar and new. I never realized how much I missed this," Nathan said finally, his voice soft. "Not just the company, but the understanding. The kind of connection we had, it's rare." Emily nodded, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "I know," she whispered. "I've thought about it often, about us, about the moments we shared and the times we didn't. And I've wondered what it all meant." He looked at her then, his expression open, unguarded. "I've wondered too," he admitted. "I thought maybe I had lost it, or maybe we had. Lost each other. But seeing you now, it's like the years melted away. The bond we had, it's still here. I feel it as strongly as ever." Emily felt her chest tighten. She had imagined this conversation countless times, but the reality was more overwhelming than she expected. The longing, the hesitation, the quiet struggle to balance hope with fear, it all came rushing forward, and she had to pause to steady her breath. "It's strange," she said finally, "how life can take you away from someone you care about, and yet when the time is right, it can bring you back." She hesitated, glancing down at her hands. "I didn't know if I'd ever see you again, and now that you're here, I don't want to let it pass without saying what I feel." Nathan leaned forward slightly, careful not to rush her, as if sensing the fragility of the moment. "Emily, you don't have to say it all at once. I think we both know, even if we haven't spoken the words yet. What matters is that we're here, together, tonight." She looked up at him, and for a moment the room was silent except for the gentle rain. There was no pressure, no expectation, only the quiet recognition of shared feeling. Emily realized that love, or whatever this deep connection was, didn't need to be forced into words. Sometimes it existed in glances, in gestures, in the mere presence of someone who knew you completely. "I've carried this quietly," Emily admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Even when I tried to convince myself it didn't matter, it did. Nathan, it always mattered." Nathan's eyes softened, and he reached out, placing his hand lightly over hers. The gesture was gentle, reassuring, and full of unspoken promises. "I know," he said softly. "I felt the same. Every day, in small ways, I remembered. Every letter, every memory. It kept me connected to you, even when we were apart." The warmth of his hand over hers seemed to bridge the years of distance and hesitation. Emily's heart swelled with a quiet, steady emotion, love, longing, hope, and gratitude all mingling together. She realized that the storm outside had done more than shake the trees and rattle the windows. It had shaken open something inside her, a vulnerability she had long avoided. And now it was met with understanding, with care, with someone who truly saw her. "I think," she began slowly, "we were always meant to find each other again. Maybe not sooner, maybe not without distance, but tonight. Tonight feels like the moment we were meant to have." Nathan nodded, a small, gentle smile forming on his lips. "Yes, tonight feels like the right moment. And we can. We can take it slowly, carefully. No rush, just this." He gestured around the room, their shared space, the candlelight, the warmth of the fire, the quiet understanding between them. Emily let out a soft, relieved sigh. The tension in her chest eased slightly, replaced by a sense of calm she hadn't felt in years. The unspoken truths, the longing, the hesitation, the memories of what had been and what could be were fine. The rain had finally eased, leaving the world outside washed and quiet. Puddles reflected the soft gray morning sky and the occasional gust of wind-sent droplets skimming across the garden. Inside the house was warm and still, filled with the soft glow of the fire and the lingering scent of wet earth from the storm. Emily sat on the sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Nathan had moved to the armchair opposite her, and they shared a quiet moment, each lost in thought. It was a delicate silence, the kind that existed between people who knew each other too well to need words, yet still had so much left unsaid. Emily's mind raced with memories and emotions she had tucked away for years. She thought about the afternoons spent wandering through the park with Nathan, the laughter they shared, the quiet understanding that had always existed between them. She thought about the distance, the choices, and the lives they had led apart, so much time lost. And yet, in this very moment, it all felt like it could be reclaimed. Nathan leaned forward slightly, his gaze fixed on the fire, and then he spoke. His voice low but steady. "Emily, I've been holding something inside for a long time." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had sensed this moment coming, but hadn't known exactly how or when it would arrive. Her hands tightened in her lap as she leaned forward slightly, urging him silently to continue. "I tried to ignore it," Nathan said, his eyes finally meeting hers. "I told myself it was the past, that life had moved on, that maybe it was better to leave things as memories. But the truth is I never stopped caring. Not for you, not for what we had. Even when life pulled us in different directions, even when years passed, I carried it with me. Every day." Emily's chest tightened. The words she had been longing to hear for years, yet had never dared to expect, were finally spoken. She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not of sadness, but of relief, of recognition, of something she had buried deep within her heart. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. I feel the same way. I've tried to tell myself that the past was enough, that life had its reasons for keeping us apart. But it wasn't enough. I've carried it to every single day. I just didn't know if I would ever get the chance to say it." Nathan's face softened into a gentle, relieved smile. He rose from the chair and moved closer, the firelight catching the glint in his eyes. "Then maybe tonight, maybe this storm, brought us a second chance. A chance to finally be honest with ourselves." Emily nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I've imagined this moment for years," she admitted, her eyes glistening. "But it's even more real than I hoped. I didn't think I could feel this again." Nathan reached out, hesitating for just a moment before lightly taking her hand in his. The warmth of his touch was comforting, steady, and familiar. "You don't have to imagine it anymore," he said softly. "It's here, right now, and I don't want to let it pass without making it real." Emily's breath caught in her chest. This was the turning point she had sensed, the moment where the unspoken became spoken, where hesitation gave way to truth. The house seemed to shrink around them, the firelight flickering across their faces, creating a cocoon of warmth and understanding. The storm outside, once chaotic and loud, had quieted, leaving only the soft, gentle sound of rain against the roof, a perfect mirror for the calm yet intense emotions inside. "I was afraid," Emily admitted, her voice small but steady. "Afraid that saying it out loud might change everything, or that it wouldn't mean the same to you. But hearing you now, it feels like coming home." Nathan squeezed her hand gently, a silent reassurance that they were in this moment together. "I've been afraid too," he confessed. "Afraid that years apart had weakened what we had. Afraid that you might not feel the same. But seeing you, hearing you, it's all I needed to know." They sat in silence for a moment, letting the weight of their words sink in. No one spoke, yet everything had been said. The unspoken truths, the hidden emotions, the quiet longing, they were no longer buried. They were alive, acknowledged, and shared between them. Emily felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years, a gentle joy that came from finally being seen, finally being understood, and finally being able to respond in kind. Nathan's presence was grounding, steady, and filled with the promise of what could come next. "I don't want to waste another day," Emily said softly. "Not with regret, not with what-ifs. If this is real, if we truly feel this, and we should embrace it." Nathan smiled, his eyes reflecting the firelight and the deep sincerity of his heart. "Then we will," he said simply. "Together, step by step, at our own pace. But we won't let it pass again." And in that moment, the storm outside was no longer a force of chaos, but a symbol of transformation. It had shaken their world, washed away the dust of old fears, and left behind something clear, bright, and full of promise. The turning point had arrived, not with grand gestures, but with truth, courage, and the simple, undeniable power of being honest with the heart. For the first time in years, Emily and Nathan felt the freedom to truly start again, aware of the past, embracing the present, and cautiously, beautifully, stepping toward a shared. The morning light filtered gently through the curtains, casting a soft glow over the living room. The storm had passed entirely, leaving the world outside fresh, clean, and shimmering with tiny droplets of rain. The garden sparkled, and the air carried the faint scent of wet earth and blooming flowers. Inside, the house was quiet, but in a comforting, peaceful way, not the lonely, quiet Emily had grown accustomed to, but a calm that felt like the world had paused to catch its breath. Emily sat on the sofa, her hands resting in her lap, feeling the warmth of the fire still glowing softly nearby. Nathan had moved to the armchair across from her, and for a few moments they simply watched the light shift and dance across the room. The silence between them was no longer heavy or awkward. It was full, meaningful, and deeply satisfying. "I can't remember the last time the house felt this." "Right?" Emily said softly, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Nathan chuckled quietly, nodding. "It does feel different, doesn't it? Like something in the air has changed, even though everything else looks the same." Emily's gaze lingered on him. She had spent years imagining what it would feel like to reconnect, to find her way back to someone who had once been a constant in her life. And now, after the storm, after long conversations, shared memories, and spoken truths, it felt real, tangible, gentle, and full of hope. "I never thought," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "that a night like this, with a storm, a knock on the door, and a little bit of fate, would bring us back together. But I'm grateful, so grateful." Nathan reached out and placed his hand lightly over hers. "Me too," he said. "Life has a way of reminding us what matters most, even when we think we've moved on. I guess we needed this moment, needed the storm to realize what we had been missing." Emily smiled, her eyes glistening. She felt a quiet contentment, a sense of being understood and seen in a way that words could barely capture. The past, with all its mistakes, missed chances, and silent longing, had led them to this very moment-to-moment that was theirs alone. Untouched by time or circumstance, they spent the morning in quiet companionship, talking softly about small things, favorite books, old memories, and the little details of everyday life. Every laugh, every shared glance reinforced the bond they had always shared. It wasn't a storybook romance filled with grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was far more precious than that. It was real, grounded, and enduring, built on years of understanding and care. At one point, Nathan rose to open a window and let the fresh post-storm air in. The room filled with the scent of rain and greenery, a reminder that life was moving forward, renewed and bright. Emily followed him, smiling as the gentle breeze brushed her hair. "You know," she said softly, "I used to imagine that life could only move in one direction. That once something was lost, it was gone forever. But now I see that sometimes life has a way of bringing the right people back at the right time." Nathan nodded, his eyes warm and steady. "And when it does, it's worth holding on to. Carefully, patiently, but with all your heart." They stood together, looking out at the garden glistening in the morning light. The world felt wide and full of possibility, as if the storm had not only washed away the rain, but also swept away old doubts and fears. Emily felt a quiet joy welling up inside her, a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. "I think this is the beginning of something new," she said. "Not forgetting the past, but moving forward with it, appreciating it, learning from it, and finally embracing what's right in front of us." Nathan smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "I think you're right," he said, "and we'll take it one day at a time. But we'll take it together." For the first time in a long while, Emily allowed herself to simply breathe and be present. The storm had passed, the world was calm, and life felt full of possibilities. There was no need to rush, no pressure to fix or change anything beyond the present. The connection they had rediscovered was enough. It was strong, steady, and beautiful in its simplicity. They returned to the living room, sitting side by side now, hands occasionally brushing against one another in small, comforting gestures. Outside, the garden glimmered in the soft morning light, and a few birds began to future.